Good day, fellow Sarnians. Welcome to another episode of the Sarnalonian Bee, where we use comedy, satire, and just pure good old-fashioned sarcasm to lighten the mood in the political sphere. If you're new here, please give the page a follow so that you're aware of all our new posts and videos. With that said, let's dig into today's topic, which is a more broad topic in the sense that it touches on all levels of government, and it's this boogeyman term,
Christian nationalism.
And as a Christian myself, this phrase has been tossed around towards me for many, many years. And I feel it comes from people who just don't know what they're saying, and they don't understand the perspective I'm coming from, especially when it relates to politics. So let's start by taking away the word Christian. What is nationalism? Well, if you were to ask Google, nationalism is identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. So in other words, Canada First policies, taking care of our own citizens first before other countries. Many Canadians are not thrilled when they find out Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spends $4 billion on military aid in Ukraine to help them in a war when we have our own plethora of problems. And this is where the moral questions start coming into the fold. You know, who do we want to help, and what's the limit in which we will help them? And do we always put our needs aside for the average country who is at war? And this is where the issues of borders, language, culture comes into play, where we ask ourselves, do we want to be a sovereign nation that holds to and are proud of our own moral, ethical, cultural, economical, and societal standards? Or do we want to be the international community center that is open to anyone at any time for any reason at the expense of those who don't want to become like the countries that these people are fleeing from? So to put this into a metaphor, it's like a building being on fire and us deciding whether or not we want to save our kids first or somebody else's kids. And we can have different moral and ethical conversations surrounding this, but I think the majority of people would choose their own children first. So nationalism, in a nutshell, is the opposite of globalism, imperialism, transnationalism, all these things that are trying to unite the world under one world government. But what about Christian nationalism, or white nationalism, which has been another term tossed around just as loosely? Well, much like the words hate, bigoted, radical, racist, supremacist, the phrase Christian nationalist is also an exaggerated derogatory term used to strawman the average person who rejects the idea of saving other people's children from the fire, so to speak. The proper use of the phrase Christian nationalism would probably be more appropriately placed with what we see in the United States, for example, where we see a lot of people put patriotism on par with their relationship with God. So they'll believe things like the Constitution is inspired, much like the Bible is inspired, or that prayer should be mandated in schools, or American flags should be mounted in every church. It's what I like to call a top-to-bottom approach, which is out of line in terms of what most people want who agree with nationalism. So let me explain to you what I mean by top-to-bottom approach. Do you know what the Breitbart Doctrine is? It's the idea that politics is downstream from culture, and that to change politics, one must first change the culture. Well, Christian nationalism starts at the top, where they want to change the politics by force before they change the culture, which, I mean, that's just not a good idea. In fact, as a Christian, I want to take it another step further in the opposite direction. I add to this Breitbart Doctrine by saying I want to share Christ with people so that hopefully I can influence their worldview. Then by their choice, they go into the culture and do the same thing. And my best hope as a Christian is to one day see a culture that loves God, because that will affect the politics that I want to see. So where does the worry come from? Well, there's folks that are concerned that Christian or even conservative values might be shoved down their throats if they don't keep Christians out of office. They don't recognize that there's Christians like me who don't want to shove it down your throat. But I think this is where it gets confusing, because in our Western society, and not a lot of people will give credit to this, but a lot of the frameworks of what we enjoy in our country is because of Judeo-Christian values. I mean, think about the justice system, this idea of innocent until proven guilty, the need for witnesses. How about hospitals, charities, universal education? Even science itself was inspired by men and women who wanted to get closer to their creator. I mean, it's given us a basis for every human life being uniquely valuable and deserving of protection, which, by the way, rules out white nationalism, which tries to suggest some sort of racial exclusion. It gives us the framework for marriage, which I know this is going to sting a lot of people to hear, but it statistically has been shown to be a solid basis for family life. It also encourages and promotes community by having having the church as the gathering place for neighbors to support one another. I mean, I could go on and on about all these good things that you don't even have to be a Christian to enjoy. But that's the thing, a lot of us recognize these things as good for society. You may even be an atheist yet still appreciate these things. But what most people like me aren't saying is that we want to force it on you. We don't. We just think these are good standards to live by. Yes, you have the freedom to believe what you want and love who you want, but it's not a negative thing to promote things that are beneficial to society. That said, and I think this is pretty obvious, I think this all boils down to our disagreeing views on sexuality and probably abortion and all these discussions surrounding whether or not kids should be exposed to these adult themes or not. I think these are the two pillar disagreements here. Which again, love who you want, but I'm not going to stop advocating for the standard that we know produces the most good for society. I'm not after your freedom. I'm pointing out and cheerleading good ideas because that's my freedom. I have the right to desire what's best for my family, for the culture I want my kids to be exposed to, and the politics I wish to see in government. I want the best for my family, friends, my neighbors, so of course I'm going to look at all the information and go, okay, what kind of things better society? Okay, awesome, let's be a cheerleader for that. So anyways, I hope this video gave you something to think about. Please leave a comment down below, and again, don't forget to hit the follow button here on the Sarnalonian Bee. Thanks for watching today's episode. Getting your voice heard through mine, I'm Brandon McCaskill. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Sting, sting.